Alex woke up on the kitchen couch to the piercing, wild shriek of his alarm clock. He rubbed his eyes, reached for his smartphone, turned off the alarm, ran a hand over his short, prickly stubble, and glanced at the clock. It was 12:30. He had fallen asleep at 4 a.m., which meant he had slept for 7.5 hours. That was too much, considering the issue wasn't ready. The thing was, Alex was trying his hand at being the publisher of an online horror magazine. He worked in tandem with his girlfriend, Anna, who was in charge of selecting stories and sometimes helped with editing. They were, in fact, the entire staff of their magazine. Before that, Alex had worked at a small local publishing house, earning a pittance and watching enviously as a bunch of bloggers without any education made more in one stream than he did in a month. He decided to try his luck online. Despite his low salary, Alex managed to save a certain amount each month. He planned to live on this money and promote the magazine until it started to turn a profit. He quit his job, firmly deciding that even if his venture failed, he wouldn't return to his old job. It would be better to be a mover. At least then, he wouldn't feel so bad about the years he'd spent on college and his hometown newspaper. He didn't choose the horror genre by chance. He thought that in the USA, it was literally an untouched field. Competition was low, which meant profits would be high. It seemed like a good idea. But there was one thing Alex hadn't considered. Low competition isn't just due to low supply, but also to low demand. And if there's no demand, there are no profits. So this morning began with a repetition of that simple thought. After that, Alex sat on the couch, stretched, stood up, and went to the kitchen table where his computer was. He touched the touch screen and waited for the browser window to open on his magazine's website. The blood-red letters on a dark gray background at the top of the page read, "Truest online magazine, only American stories." And just below, in small white letters, "Published every month. Subscribe for half a year now for only $12. Alex went to the admin page and checked the number of paid subscriptions. It was still the same 8 people. This was after 4 months of work and a hefty sum spent on advertising. He grimaced in dissatisfaction, minimized the browser, and got into the layout program to prepare the new issue, which was supposed to be released today or tomorrow. One story was still missing. Anna had promised to send some options this morning. Anna, that's right. Alex remembered, returning to his makeshift bed, picking up the smartphone lying by one of the couch legs, opening the Messenger app, finding the chat with Anna, and tapping on the line. Hi, Alex. I'm staying at my parents' until the end of the week. I'm sorry. I picked out a few stories, and I'll send you the rest, but check this one out. When you finish reading it, call me. I want to discuss something. Let's see, Alex said, and tapped on the PDF document Anna had sent him. A letter to the editor. I met Sarah in 6th grade when she transferred to our school. Tall, beautiful, polite, and neat, she was my complete opposite. Maybe that's why I fell in love with her at first sight. But over time, my affection grew much deeper and turned into a real, sincere, and the brightest teenage love of my life. In the first few days of school, we didn't really get to know each other. She mostly talked to other girls. My resolve was only enough to timidly say hello to her. And then it became clear that I wasn't the only one who had his eye on the new girl. Both my classmates and older guys started to pester her. It became clear to me that I had no chance with Sarah. But I couldn't extinguish the flame of my feelings and tame my teenage fantasies. I fantasized about her all day. I imagined us walking hand in hand in the park, wandering through the autumn forest, scattering leaves everywhere, and throwing snowflakes in the winter. And at night, to avoid turning this letter into a collection of teenage erotic fantasies, allow me to remain silent about my night fantasies. I'll just say this. The image of this girl became my standard of femininity, charm, and beauty. The more I got to know her, the more my passion grew. Sarah not only rejected the advances of all the boys at school, but also showed remarkable integrity. She always dressed conservatively. No short skirts or crop tops. Yes, those were the days when schoolgirls could show up to class with provocative makeup, bare midriffs, and skirts above their knees. She never wore makeup and showed indifference to the superficial interests of other girls her age. These qualities only strengthened my admiration for Sarah. But realizing that I had no chance of competing with the other boys, who were much taller and stronger than me, I decided to try to get her attention another way, by adopting the role of the class clown. I loudly made silly jokes, deliberately slipped on flat ground, fell comically, and made faces. In short, the full range of comedic tricks available to a teenager at that age. Needless to say, my behavior did attract Sarah's attention, but not in the way I had hoped. She simply stopped acknowledging me, sometimes not even responding to my routine hello that I said every morning when I saw her. The look she occasionally gave me was filled with dislike and contempt. So I lost all hope, not only of making Sarah fall in love with me, but even of just becoming her friend. I would glance in her direction with poorly hidden longing, and had almost no contact with her. Everything changed when I least expected it. For a literature class, we were assigned to write a poem on any topic, and poetry had always been close to my heart. I had filled a notebook with poems of my own composition. They were very personal, so I was embarrassed to read them to others. But I didn't have time to compose something new and worthwhile. So, I chose the most harmless poem from the notebook and read it in class. It was about my love of nature. I used rhymes that I thought were original. As expected, my classmates paid no attention to my work. At least they didn't make fun of me, which I had feared. The teacher gave me the grade I expected, an A. Literature was my favorite subject. But after class, something unexpected happened. Sarah came up to me, praised my poem, and asked if I had composed anything else. I think you can imagine how my tongue got tangled up when I answered, how red my face got, and how many times I averted my eyes from her beautiful face. Nevertheless, I managed to stammer that I had a lot of poems, but I was too shy to read them to others. "That's a shame," Sarah said with a faint smile. "If you would make an exception for me, I would love to hear them. You write wonderfully." Of course, I made an exception for her. We arranged to meet. I showed up with my notebook and invited her to the city park, where, wandering along the leaf-strewn paths between the trees, I recited my poems aloud for the first time in my life. At first, I was nervous, but when Sarah kept marveling at my poetry, finding the images I had created to be wonderful and apt, I gained confidence. I read them exactly as they sounded in my head when I wrote them, brightly, loudly, with feeling and expression. That's how we became friends. We spent that entire school year inseparable, and during the summer vacation, we literally walked together every day. I will never forget our first kiss, clumsy, slobbery, but so long awaited and desired. We were walking home in the evening through the park, and we got caught in a warm summer rain, getting soaked to the bone. The wet asphalt reflected the bright, multicolored illuminations hanging on the lampposts. It was as if we were walking on the surface of a lake lit up by fireworks. It was bright, beautiful, and magical. And it felt like it was all just for us. Because the people, scared of the rain, had scattered, and there wasn't a soul in the whole park. Only occasionally did we see gloomy shop owners closing up for the night and unhappy with the low earnings for the day. Sarah smiled faintly. Her white dress had become almost transparent, clinging to her body and highlighting the elegant curves of her teenage figure, allowing me to see her underwear. Her hair was also wet, flowing down her back and shoulders like a dark yellow waterfall, clinging to her face, reminding me of the images of women with slicked-down hair painted by Renaissance artists. Do I even need to say what was happening in my soul, what passions were boiling there, when I looked at her in that truly special moment? During the time we had known each other, she had made it clear that she was a girl with a strict set of rules. I was afraid that being too aggressive would scare her away, but I couldn't hold back. And when we reached the turn from the wide road to the sidewalk leading to our neighborhood, I grabbed Sarah's wrist, gently pulled her toward me, touched her cheek with my other hand, and, standing on my tiptoes, touched her lips with mine. I expected her to harshly put me in my place, but instead, she tilted her head, parted her lips, and kissed me back. So we stood there, trying to adjust to each other, to give a piece of the happiness that each of us was feeling. And I believe that Sarah was also happy at that moment. No matter how clumsy our first kiss turned out to be, I wasn't embarrassed by it. I held my girlfriend's hand tightly, and after admiring her grateful smile, I led her home. "I thought you'd never get the nerve to do that," Sarah said to me before we parted and kissed me on the lips again. As I walked home, I couldn't believe that such a girl had truly fallen in love with me, short and insecure as I was. Sometimes these qualities of mine led to conflict situations, as I was almost a head shorter than her. When we walked hand in hand, people often mistook us for brother and sister, and the most brazen boys would come up to try and get to know Sarah. To be honest, I didn't know how to act, especially since they were 2 or 3 years older than me. If it had come to a fight, I would have definitely been beaten up. Sarah always made it clear that she didn't want anything to do with them. She was one of those people who despised violence and shattered the stereotype that girls prefer bad boys. That unforgettable year we spent together, first as friends and then as a couple, I will never forget. And then Sarah said that her parents were moving again, and she would have to change schools again. She promised to write, saying that we were still together, and that distance was not a barrier for us, but I found it hard to believe. However, I didn't voice my thoughts. I helped her pack her things, and on the day of her departure, the first days of September, I stood by her front gate from the morning. When her parents' car started moving, I admired Sarah with longing in my eyes, thinking it was the last time. Her sad look, a flying kiss, her wet eyes, that's what stuck in my memory. And then the car moved, drove to the intersection, where it was hit by some reckless driver. Sarah's body was literally thrown from the car, like a rag doll. She flew to the side of the road and lay motionless, smeared with roadside dust and blood. After that, the street became eerily quiet. Everything around me seemed to freeze. And I, too, stood frozen, not knowing how to act. I didn't grasp what had happened. Something inside me pushed me to take a step towards Sarah's body. Another, a third, a fourth. And now I was running the 300 yards to the intersection. But I covered the distance very quickly, much faster than in my gym classes. I got closer to her and saw that her head was turned at an unnatural angle. A long shard was deeply embedded in her neck, from which a dark crimson, almost black, blood was leaking. Sarah was motionless, only her lips twitching. I immediately thought of a fish that had been thrown onto the shore. I remembered how I used to laugh at the minnows jumping at the edge of the lake when my family and I went there. And because of that, I started to quietly laugh. Only then did I notice that the area was full of people. Everyone was screaming. Someone was knocking on the doors of a house, asking if the owners had a phone, demanding they call an ambulance, and I was standing over Sarah's body, laughing as if nothing terrible had happened. She would get up, straighten her broken neck, pull the shard out of it, and we would go play. After that, a monotonous period began, colored by inhuman grief, a sense of loss, and shame for laughing at the body of the girl I loved, who had just died. My memories are fragmented. I remember being at Sarah's funeral, when I went up to the coffin and tried to place my notebook of poems in it. For some reason, someone yelled at me, hit my hands, and pushed me. My notebook was snatched away, torn to shreds, and thrown onto the road. Then I remember some lowlife at school making a joke about Sarah. I grabbed my metal pencil case and hit him right in the temple with all my might. Blood spurted out like juice from an overripe cherry and stained the people around me, their books, notebooks, desks, walls, and curtains. The boys survived, and I was taken to the juvenile police department. From there, I was sent to a psychiatrist. I was forbidden from going to school and was put on home schooling. This was the first time I felt calmer. By staying in my room, I could create the illusion that Sarah was alive, that she would call at the apartment door and ask me to go for a walk. I would write a poem and read it to her first, listening to her opinion and comments. We would hold hands, run through the rain in the park, admiring the night lights reflected in the puddles, and kiss under the canopies of old trees. And then Sarah started to appear to me as if she were alive. At first, I thought it was a dream, but it wasn't. She whispered in my ear that she had returned because of my love, my longing, and my pain. I hadn't let her go, and she had come because she wanted to be with me. It was complete nonsense. But how real it seemed to me. She would slip into my bedroom through the open window. I lived on the 3rd floor of a 5-story building. She would lie down next to me, hug me, press against me, and kiss me, and I would taste blood on my lips, feel a slight pain, and a strong excitement. But then Sarah would pull away from my lips, become sad, and gaze into the distance. I would ask her why she wasn't kissing me anymore. Had she stopped loving me? "You'll die," she would answer at such moments. "If I continue to come to you for us to be together, you must take me as your wife, and your parents must approve this marriage. I'm not 18 yet. How can I get married? This is a different kind of marriage. Your word is enough. Ask me if I agree to marry you, and when I agree, say that you are taking me as your wife." I repeated all this. "Now it's your parents' turn. Get their consent to our marriage. It's enough for them to say, 'Yes, we will accept Sarah as our daughter-in-law.' If they say that, we will be together forever." And then I woke up, and Sarah was gone, and it repeated night after night. Mom was very worried that I wasn't going outside and wasn't eating well. "Son, look how thin you become. You can't waste away like this." I nodded and remained silent for a long time. One day, when my belief in the reality of my encounters with Sarah became unshakable, I asked my mom to say, "Yes, I accept Sarah as a daughter-in-law." She looked sad and at first refused to do it. She asked who had prompted me to ask that. But I didn't give up. I said that if she and my dad said it, I would feel better. I convinced her. And when Sarah came to me the next night, she was more affectionate than ever and kissed me so hard that I only came to in the hospital, exhausted and weak, with a diagnosis of anemia. Mom immediately ran up to me and started kissing me, and I only smiled weakly, and just barely moving my tongue, I promised her that everything would be all right. And everything truly did become all right when Sarah came to visit me in the hospital again, because the next morning I died, and with my death, The endless longing that had made my life unbearable and meaningless went away. Everything once again became like a dream. Here I am in the morgue. A pathologist is rummaging inside me, taking out my organs, examining them, weighing them, taking them away somewhere and not returning them. He stitches me up, leaving sloppy seams on my stomach and chest. Here I am, lying in a coffin in the yard of my house. My relatives and acquaintances, friends and classmates come up to me. Some are crying quietly, whispering something. Mom is wailing. Her screams are so loud that I want to get up and comfort her. But my arms and legs won't listen to me. They are stiff, cold, and motionless. Here the coffin is being lifted, carried to the bus, and carelessly pushed into the cabin. My closest relatives are sitting on the seats around it. Mom doesn't leave my body, drenching my face with her tears. It tickles, but I can't move and wipe her tears away. Here I am, brought to the cemetery. Mom looked at me one last time, let out a terrible cry, and fainted. Dad, himself without strength, couldn't hold her. They'd both fall. My sister is horrified. She seems to think our parents have died too. How do I see this if my dead eyes are closed? I don't know myself, but I see it as clearly as I did when I was alive. Here someone is helping my dad get up, and someone is reviving my mom with smelling salts. The coffin is being nailed shut, and it becomes dark and cold. My body is shaking, and I feel myself being knocked from one side of the coffin to the other. The dull sound of an impact. I have been lowered into the grave. I hear dirt falling. I don't know how, but I guess I will need it. I will need it very much. Clumps fall onto the lid of the coffin. They are throwing dirt to say goodbye to me. Well, goodbye. Even if I wanted to, I can no longer see you. And after a while, a whole waterfall of dirt pours onto the coffin. It's stuffy and damp, but not scary at all, even though I can feel my body beginning to decompose underground. I feel calm, and right now, that's what's most important. Here, at least for a moment, I can forget that I have lost Sarah forever. Midnight arrives. I don't know how I know this, but something strange begins to happen to me. My body falls apart, and I become like a huge ball of worms that crawl all over the coffin, looking for crevices through which they can get out. This process goes on for a very long time, but finally, the worms manage to get out into the dirt. They swallow it, gain strength, crawl to the surface, and squirm around. I am like the autumn morning fog that easily slips through the cracks in the coffin, moistens the ground, and slowly rises to the surface. I am nowhere and everywhere at the same time. I don't know how long this feeling lasts. It's enchanting and incomparable to anything else. But it all comes to an end. And at midnight, I wake up, lying on my grave, spitting dirt out of my mouth, lifting my head, opening my eyes, looking around, and I see Sarah, who is sitting on a neighboring grave and smiling at me. At her feet, there is a canister of water, and in her hands, a towel and a bag of clothes. She helps me wash off the dirt, get dressed, and get used to standing on my feet and breathing the air again. When I had gotten a little used to it, she handed me a rag. "Take some dirt from your grave," Sarah teaches me, "and never part with it. When you sleep, be sure to put it under your head, otherwise you will die forever." I do as she says, and we slowly leave the cemetery, holding hands. I try to go back to my parents, but Sarah stops me. "He allowed me to tell you everything. He doesn't want to scare you," she says. "You can't tell anyone. They won't understand. Only we can understand each other, my love. We have no one else. Who is he? You'll find out someday," Sarah promises. I really did find out when I heard a menacing, quiet voice in my head. He spoke the words indistinctly, monotonously. He thanked me for missing Sarah so much. He said he liked it, so he rewarded not only Sarah, who had ignited a desperate love in my soul, but also me. And he didn't do that very often. At first, I only knew good from him. He helped Sarah and me get settled in life, get our documents in order, find housing, find a job for Sarah, who, although she had died very young, looked like she was 17 or 18. He even found a school for me. Yes, he gave us invaluable help because when he intervened, people didn't ask unnecessary questions. I realized that I had stopped growing and stopped aging. And Sarah had too. She hadn't lied. We would be together forever. I thought it was just a gift from him for our pure, innocent love. But one day he asked for a favor in gratitude for his help. I was to kill a boy from my school whom I barely knew. I had to get to know him, gain his trust, and drink his blood from time to time. At first, I felt something similar to a pang of conscience, because I knew that sooner or later he would die, just as I had died. But he wouldn't rise from the dead and wouldn't become like me. However, along with his words came a thirst. I don't know if he sent it or if it was just time, but I knew that if I didn't drink the boy's blood, sooner or later, I would attack someone else. So I obeyed, started to track my victims, and in the process of hunting, I discovered that I could cloud people's minds, instill trust in them, and suppress their sense of alarm. The boy came up to me himself, just as a fly flies to a Venus flytrap. He invited me to his house himself, introduced me to his parents himself, and they immediately decided that I was a very good boy. All I had to do was sink my teeth into his wrist when we were alone in his room. And after I finished drinking, I would make sure that there were almost no marks left on his skin, for tiny dots that you couldn't see unless you looked closely. I started to go to his house regularly in the middle of the night. I would just ring the doorbell, and his father would open it for me. I would say that everything was all right, and ask him to go to bed. By morning, no one even remembered me. Only the boy himself said that in his dreams I would fly to him through the window. I also easily got into the hospital when the boy was already dying. But there was a mishap. One of the patients saw me and raised a fuss. No one came to help him. The spell was too strong. But that's how I learned that some people are resistant to my charms. After that discovery, I calmly finished drinking the boy's blood and, leaving his lifeless body on the bed, left the hospital unhindered to the desperate screams of the bedridden patient. Sarah and I went to the funeral together. I watched the suffering of his parents closely and understood that he liked it. That's why he made me do it, but I felt sorry for them. Truly sorry. I'm not some heartless, cold-blooded killer. What I did was monstrous. But did I have a choice? And if I did, what was it? Almost 20 years have passed since then, but these questions continue to bother me just as they did before. There is no simple answer to them, so I prefer not to dwell on them. So Sarah and I live on. We never argue. We love each other just as much as we did as teenagers. Physiologically, that's what we have remained. People still mistake us for brother and sister, but now, if anyone bothers her, I know I can stand up for my beloved. I will appear to the offender on the darkest night of the year, make him open the door for me, and let me into his house, and then I will drink his blood. Yes, that's how we live, loving each other and killing people from time to time. Postscript. Dear editor, or whoever is in charge of selecting materials for the magazine, I would like to address you personally. If this letter is not published in your next issue, I will remember it, and perhaps one day we will meet. You do understand that everything written here is true, don't you? Alex finished reading the letter, exited the reading app, went to the messenger app, and wrote to Anna. Don't you have anything better? This is some kind of melodrama. The only horror is in the postscript, and even that is addressed to me. After that, he put his smartphone down, took out his cigarettes, and went out onto the balcony to smoke and think about life. The weather outside was awful. The sky was gray, and a fine, unpleasant rain was falling. There were almost no passers-by. There was a surprising harmony between the outer world and his inner one. Alex's soul felt just as cold, chilly, gray, and vile. No one wanted to buy the magazine, even though he had spent a lot of money on advertising. Anna no longer supported his venture. The future was uncertain. As he was thinking about all this, he noticed that one of the passers-by had stopped right under his balcony and wasn't going anywhere. It was a boy, dressed inappropriately for the weather in a light gray autumn jacket, when it was almost freezing outside. He looked about 12 or 13 at the most. He was standing there and staring up. When their eyes met, the teenager raised his hand and waved, and then went on his way. Alex was confused and thoughtful. After a while, his smartphone chirped, pulling him out of his thoughts. Absent-mindedly looking at the cigarette that had burned down to the filter, Alex carelessly flicked the ashes out the window. He threw the butt into the trash can on the balcony, went to his phone, saw a message from Anna, and opened the chat. Yeah, there are others. The postscript just made me uneasy, so I sent you this story first. You know how many crazy people there are out there now. Maybe we should publish it to be safe? Alex remembered the boy in the gray jacket. They were too far apart to make out the teenager's facial features, but the mere fact of his presence and that hand gesture. Okay, publish it, Alex messaged Anna. Just to be safe, he mumbled to himself.